No one really understood what happened that morning in Chicago. A woman left the company building in tears, clutching her bag to her chest with a look that hid a secret. Some laughed, others stayed silent, but none of them had any idea that in just a few hours she would return and change the fate of everyone inside. In Chicago, the sky was a dull gray when Sarah Miller, 29, stepped into the Eagle Consulting office for the first time. She held a coffee in one hand and wore a shy smile, the kind that tries to hide nervousness. She wore a navy blazer, light dress pants, and simple but elegant shoes. Her dark brown hair was pulled into a loose bun, a few strands framing her face. You could see in her eyes that she was focused, but still carried that fear of making mistakes. Little did she know, this day would be the most unforgettable of her life. Sarah was the kind of person who observed more than she spoke. She had a habit of jotting down everything, even the smallest details, in a worn notebook she carried in her bag. When something made her nervous, she would run her thumb over the silver ring on her index finger, a little trick to calm herself. She wasn't the type to seek attention, but she had a quiet presence, the kind that inspires trust without saying much. Yet, in that place, no one seemed to notice. The office was large, modern, and bustling with people rushing around with phones and coffee cups. Screens flashed, meetings were in progress, laughter sounded forced, and the usual corporate tension filled the air. Sarah walked in with genuine enthusiasm, ready to show her worth. But within minutes, she felt the atmosphere wasn't welcoming. People greeted each other politely, but with a calculating glance, as if constantly measuring who was more important. She was introduced to the team by a hurried manager who barely looked up from his notebook. "Everyone, this is the new analyst, Sarah," he said. That was it. No handshake, no welcome aboard, just a few cold, disguised looks. The message was clear. In this office, if your name wasn't big or your position wasn't high, you didn't matter much. Sarah took a deep breath, hiding the twinge of discomfort she felt. Still, she stayed focused. She organized her desk, turned on her computer, and began reviewing reports with almost obsessive attention. She was good at what she did, and that quickly caught attention, which ironically didn't please everyone. One colleague whispered to another, "Does this newbie think she can keep up with the pace here?" Sarah pretended not to hear, but the smile she gave was the kind that carried more strength than anger. During lunch, she ate alone in the cafeteria. Others gathered in groups, laughing loudly about things she didn't understand. Even when she tried to join in, she was always met with that subtle air of, "You don't belong." But instead of shrinking away, Sarah used the time to observe. She noticed who was fake, who was sucking up to the boss, and who was actually working. Slowly, she began to understand the game. Deep down, Sarah knew she wasn't there by accident. There was a bigger reason, something no one in that office could imagine. Looking out the window, she saw the city reflected in the buildings and thought, "They're going to realize who I really am." And right there, in that quiet moment, something inside her shifted. It was no longer just about fitting in. It was about showing the value they were trying to erase. This quiet woman, underestimated by everyone, carried a secret powerful enough to turn everything upside down. And what came next, no one in that office would ever forget. The Eagle Consulting office was a modern, bustling place. But behind the sleek glass walls, tension hung in the air like fog. Employees moved quickly between desks, phones ringing constantly, screens blinking with endless emails and deadlines. Everyone seemed to be in a competition no one had announced, a silent game where appearances mattered more than results. The hierarchy was unspoken but felt everywhere. One wrong move, and you could become invisible. Sarah walked past the rows of desks, noticing the hurried glances and whispered conversations. People smiled politely, but there was always a trace of calculation behind the gesture. Some stopped to nod, others barely acknowledged her presence. It was subtle, almost invisible to the untrained eye, but Sarah noticed everything. She had learned early that in offices like this, power didn't just live in titles. It thrived in quiet manipulation and hidden alliances. Meetings were a stage for performance. People spoke loudly, interrupting each other, showing off presentations more for ego than clarity. Laughter was forced, nods were strategic, and even compliments often carried a pinch of condescension. Sarah sat quietly during one session, sipping her coffee and listening. Every joke aimed at someone's expense, every glance of disdain, every whispered aside. It was all part of the rhythm of this place. She was learning the moves, studying the players. The office had its elite group, a handful of employees who carried themselves like royalty. They occupied prime desks near the windows, wore sharp suits, and spoke with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. If you weren't part of this inner circle, you were an outsider, and outsiders were easy to ignore, dismiss, or even humiliate. Sarah felt the weight of their presence immediately, but instead of shrinking, she quietly marked every detail, every mannerism, every little hierarchy that defined the room. Even the manager, Mr. Dalton, contributed to the subtle tension. He spoke in measured tones, praised selectively, and often looked for someone to blame. His approval was currency, and everyone wanted it. Sarah quickly realized that being competent wasn't tea enough here. It was about knowing how to navigate a sea of egos. One wrong word, one overlooked glance could shift perception in an instant. Lunch breaks were just another stage. People gathered in clusters, sharing gossip and inside jokes, reinforcing alliances. Outsiders like Sarah were often left to their own devices, and though it stung, she observed quietly. She noticed patterns. Who whispered to whom? Who avoided eye contact with the elite? Who always looked for the boss's attention? Slowly, she started mapping the social landscape, a skill as critical as any report or spreadsheet in this environment. Despite the coldness, there was an unspoken excitement in the air. High-stakes hidden power plays, the thrill of maneuvering through invisible obstacles. It made the office pulse with intensity. For Sarah, this wasn't discouraging. It was fuel. She didn't just want to survive here. She wanted to understand the rules, master them, and eventually turn the game in her favor. By the end of her first day, she had observed enough to feel a quiet confidence. She knew the office wasn't just a workplace. It was a battlefield of egos, strategies, and hidden truths. And Sarah Miller had come prepared, not to follow, but to learn. To see who really led and who merely pretended. A storm was brewing, and she would be at the center of it. It didn't take long for Sarah to feel the cold undercurrents in the office. Whispers followed her wherever she went. Tiny smirks appeared when she passed by, and subtle gestures made it clear she wasn't considered one of them. A colleague would laugh just a little too loudly at an inside joke, or glance at her reports with a raised eyebrow, silently questioning her competence. The message was clear. She was underestimated, and everyone enjoyed it. One afternoon, Sarah presented an idea during a team meeting. She carefully laid out her plan, showing data, projections, and a step-by-step strategy. At first, there was silence. Then Lauren, one of the senior staff, let out a soft chuckle followed by a whisper to a colleague. Does she really think she knows what she's doing? Sarah caught the glance, felt the sting, but kept her expression neutral. Inside, she filed it away. Every slight, every dismissive comment was a clue, a piece of the puzzle. During coffee breaks, the subtle cruelty continued. Some employees made jokes at her expense, others ignored her entirely. "Newbie thinks she's going to last here," someone muttered under their breath. Sarah didn't respond. Instead, she observed. She noticed who led the whispers, who followed, and who simply stayed silent. Each person revealed a little of their character, and Sarah paid attention to it all. Even her manager, Mr. Dalton, seemed to avoid fully acknowledging her contributions. When she asked questions or sought feedback, he gave curt, perfunctory answers, never offering guidance or encouragement. Sarah realized early, in this office, respect wasn't given. It had to be earned, and not just through skill, but through subtle social mastery. And mastering this terrain would require patience. The snide comments escalated. In the hallway, a group of colleagues would make jokes about her outfit or her coffee choice, pretending not to notice her presence. Sarah felt her chest tighten, but she kept walking with poise. She had learned a long time ago that outward calm could disarm even the most persistent antagonists. The quieter you appeared, the more underestimated you became, and underestimated was power waiting to be claimed. During one meeting, someone deliberately interrupted her while she was speaking, turning the discussion into chaos. The laughter that followed was thinly veiled malice. Sarah took a deep breath, listening carefully, noticing each tone, each reaction. She didn't get flustered. Instead, she silently began forming her plan. Every slight, every sneer was a lesson in human behavior, a lesson she intended to use to her advantage. Lunchtimes were a battlefield of glances and exclusion. While others grouped together, Sarah would sit alone, eating quietly and watching. She noticed who was ambitious, who was cruel, and who simply followed without thinking. Every observation built a map of the office's social hierarchy. And in her mind, Sarah knew one thing. The first to underestimate her would be the last to succeed. By the end of the day, it was clear Sarah was surrounded by arrogance and petty power games. But she didn't feel defeated. Instead, she felt a growing fire inside. Every mockery, every cold stare, every dismissive comment became fuel. She understood now that surviving this environment required more than skill. It required strategy, and Sarah Miller was already preparing her moves. Tension in the office reached a peak that afternoon. A mistake, minor and almost invisible, was suddenly pinned on Sarah. Someone had misplaced an important document, and though she had nothing to do with it, all eyes turned toward her. Whispers escalated into muttered accusations. Colleagues exchanged knowing looks, as if silently confirming she was to blame. The humiliation began quietly, but it spread fast. Sarah felt the heat rising in her chest, but she stayed calm. Her hand rested lightly on her notebook, her thumb brushing the silver ring on her finger, a small gesture that grounded her. Every sneer, every whisper, every sidelong glance was now a signal. They wanted her out. They wanted her defeated, but she wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. Not today, not ever. The manager, Mr. Dalton, called her into his office, his face tight with irritation. "Sarah, how could you let this happen?" he demanded. Sarah opened her mouth to explain, but the words were drowned out by his frustration. The accusation was public, and the humiliation sharper because of it. She left his office feeling a mix of disbelief and anger, her heart pounding, but with a quiet determination forming like steel inside her. In the hallway, whispers turned to snickers. Lauren and a few others watched her pass, barely hiding their smirks. Someone muttered, "Maybe she isn't cut out for this after all." Sarah's chest tightened, but instead of retreating, she walked with measured steps. Every eye that followed her was a reminder that she was underestimated, that her strength was unseen. And yet, she felt the smallest flicker of anticipation, because every challenge brings an opportunity. By the afternoon, the rumor had spread throughout the office. Sarah was the one who caused the problem, and colleagues treated her like she had already failed. Emails came with cold tones, meetings included subtle insults, and even the interns avoided her gaze. But Sarah kept her focus. Behind her calm demeanor, her mind was racing, planning her next moves with precision. Every slight, every accusation, every act of contempt was now a tool she would use later. Lunch was the hardest. Sitting alone at a corner table, she could hear the laughter from other groups. Her first instinct was to shrink, to hide, but she refused. Instead, she observed, She saw alliances forming, saw who was genuinely competent and who only thrived on arrogance. And somewhere inside, a quiet voice whispered, "This isn't the end, it's the beginning." That evening, after another grueling meeting, Sarah stepped out of the office for a moment of silence. The city of Chicago stretched before her, the lights reflecting off the glass buildings. She let out a slow breath, feeling both the sting of humiliation and the strength of resolve. Today, they had tried to push her down, but tomorrow, she would show them exactly who she really was. In those quiet moments, Sarah understood the truth. Humiliation could sting, but it could also sharpen the mind. Each injustice, each sneer, each whisper of contempt became fuel. The conflict had escalated, yes, but it had also ignited something far more powerful, a determination to take control, to turn every doubt and insult into her own advantage. And no one in that office would ever see it coming. Sarah stepped out of the office that evening, feeling the weight of the day pressing down on her. Her chest was tight, her hands trembled slightly, and the echoes of whispered insults followed her out into the street. Chicago's skyline shimmered in the fading light, but she barely noticed. Every step felt heavy, like the city itself was judging her. She was humiliated, but beneath the surface a quiet fire began to grow. She found a bench near a quiet park and sat down, clutching her bag to her chest. Tears threatened to spill, but she held them back. This wasn't just about the office anymore. It was about proving to herself that she could rise above the cruelty. The pain was sharp, but it was also a reminder no one could define her worth. Only she could. And right there, in that moment of stillness, she made a promise to herself. Thoughts raced through her mind. She replayed every insult, every smirk, every unfair accusation. At first, the memories stung, but slowly they began to sharpen her focus. She realized she wasn't powerless. She had skills, intelligence, and patience, all tools that no one in that office could take away. The humiliation was temporary, but the lessons were permanent, and Sarah understood the real game hadn't started yet. As she walked back toward her apartment, she noticed the subtle rhythms of the city. People hurrying home, cars glinting in the sunset, lights flickering on in office windows. Everything seemed to move around her, oblivious to her struggle, yet she felt more awake than ever. The city, in all its chaos and indifference, mirrored what she had to navigate inside the office: unpredictability, competition, and the need to stand firm. That night, she sat at her desk at home, reviewing her notes and plans. Her notebook, filled with observations, ideas, and strategies, became a map of her next moves. Every slight, every cold look, every whispered joke at her expense was now fuel. She wrote down thoughts, connections, and ways to turn weakness into power. Her eyes gleamed with quiet determination. The humiliation was no longer a wound. It was a weapon. Sleep didn't come easily. Instead, she rehearsed scenarios in her mind, envisioning her return, imagining the looks on people's faces when they realized they had misjudged her. Each mental rehearsal built confidence. Each imagined victory fueled courage. By morning, Sarah felt lighter, sharper, ready. The person who had walked out in tears yesterday was not the person who would walk back in. The next day, she dressed carefully, not to impress, but to command attention. Every detail, the blazer, the shoes, the way her hair was tied, was deliberate. She was calm, poised, and confident, a quiet storm ready to unfold. No one could see it yet, but the tide was about to turn. Sarah wasn't just returning to the office. She was returning as someone in control of her destiny. And in that quiet, internal moment, she realized the truth. Humiliation doesn't break you, it refines you. Pain doesn't weaken you, it sharpens you. And most importantly, when you combine patience, intelligence, and focus, even the smallest person in a crowded office can turn the game around. Sarah's resolve was absolute, and nothing could stop what was coming next. When Sarah returned to the office the next day, the atmosphere seemed different. People noticed her calm, confident stride, the subtle authority in the way she carried herself. Whispers spread almost immediately. She looks different. But no one suspected the truth. Not yet. Sarah had a secret, a position that nobody in the office could have imagined, and it was about to change everything. In the conference room, she asked everyone to gather for a short meeting. Hearts raced. Lauren and Eric exchanged uneasy glances, trying to guess what the new plan might be. Sarah stood at the head of the table, serene, her presence commanding attention without a word of aggression. She had prepared them to expect something ordinary, but what was coming would shatter expectations. "Before we begin," she started, her voice steady and clear, "there's something I need to clarify about my role here." A few eyebrows raised, some eyes narrowed in curiosity. "I am not just an analyst," she continued, pausing just long enough to create suspense. "I am a co-owner of this company. I've been part of its foundation from the beginning, behind the scenes, and today I am stepping forward to guide it personally." The room fell silent. Lauren's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Eric's face went pale, and even Mr. Dalton froze mid-sentence. The office hierarchy that had seemed so solid moments before crumbled in an instant. Sarah's calm demeanor, combined with the truth of her power, left everyone stunned. No one had anticipated that the quiet, underestimated woman they had laughed at and humiliated held the ultimate authority. Gasps echoed in the room, and some employees exchanged confused looks. "Wait, what?" whispered one of the younger staff members. Another muttered, She's the owner." Sarah simply nodded, allowing the weight of her words to settle. She didn't need to shout or threaten. The revelation itself was more than enough to command respect and shock those who had doubted her. From that moment on, the office dynamic shifted completely. The arrogance of the elite group faltered, replaced by cautious curiosity. People who had ignored her or mocked her now realized they were dealing with someone who had been holding the reins all along. Sarah had become untouchable, not through confrontation, but through the quiet revelation of her power. Even those who had tried to undermine her had to face the truth. Their judgments were shallow, their arrogance misplaced. And Sarah, watching from the head of the table, allowed them to grasp this slowly. There was no gloating, no vindictive satisfaction, only quiet authority, the kind that changes behavior without a word of aggression. By the end of the day, the office buzzed with whispers, speculation, and a new sense of order. Sarah's presence was no longer overlooked or dismissed. She had revealed her secret, and with it, shifted the balance of power completely. Everyone now understood one simple truth. Underestimating her had been their biggest mistake, and the game had just begun. When Sarah walked back into the office, the air seemed to shift. Heads turned, whispers started, and the usual hum of business suddenly felt different. The quiet, underestimated analyst was now someone no one could ignore. Every step she took was deliberate, poised, and filled with a calm authority that demanded attention. She wasn't just returning, she was reclaiming control. Lauren and Eric froze when they saw her. Their previous arrogance vanished in an instant, replaced by shock and uncertainty. They had spent months underestimating her, mocking her, testing her patience, and now, in an instant, the tables had turned. Sarah didn't need to speak harshly or make threats. Her presence alone was enough to communicate power, the kind that is respected rather than feared. The employees who had quietly respected her all along felt a wave of vindication. They had believed in her abilities from day one, and now they could finally see the truth. Sarah greeted them with a small, approving nod, acknowledging their loyalty without words. In that gesture, she created a bond of trust and respect that only deepened her authority. Sarah approached her desk calmly, organizing her things as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. The office hierarchy that once intimidated her had crumbled. Colleagues who had sneered at her ideas were now careful to listen. The atmosphere was charged with a new energy, one of cautious respect, curiosity, and the undeniable presence of someone in command. In the following meeting, Sarah took the lead effortlessly. She spoke clearly, made decisions confidently, and laid out a strategy that was impossible to ignore. Every eye in the room followed her, not out of fear, but because they recognized intelligence, vision, and authority. The power she had quietly nurtured for months now manifested naturally, undeniable, and absolute. Even Mr. Dalton, who had once questioned her every move, sat quietly, impressed by her composure and clarity. No longer just a manager, he now saw Sarah as a force to be reckoned with, someone capable of steering the company with insight and precision. The previous office dynamics, filled with arrogance and petty competition, were being replaced by order, focus, and respect. The return wasn't about revenge. It was about presence, authority, and recognition of talent. Sarah didn't need to humiliate anyone. Her quiet confidence did the work. Those who had underestimated her now had to adjust their behavior, proving that true power doesn't shout, it commands silently with results and strategy. By the end of her first day back, it was clear Sarah had transformed the office. Where there had been whispers, there was now attentive observation. Where there had been mockery, there was now respect. And in that shift, everyone realized one undeniable truth. Sarah Miller wasn't just an employee. She was the one running the show, whether anyone had realized it before or not. Sarah called a meeting in the main conference room. The atmosphere was tense, a mix of curiosity and unease. Those who had mocked and humiliated her walked in with subtle apprehension, unsure of what to expect. Sarah's calm demeanor filled the room, and in an instant everyone felt the shift. The quiet, underestimated analyst was now fully in command. Lauren shifted uncomfortably in her seat, avoiding eye contact. Eric tried to maintain his usual smug expression, but it faltered. Sarah didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to shout. Her presence alone carried authority. Every gesture, every word was deliberate, demonstrating control without aggression. The message was unmistakable. The tables had turned. Sarah started with clarity and poise. "I want to address the recent behavior in this office," she said, her voice steady and firm. She didn't accuse, she didn't yell, she simply laid out the facts, highlighting actions and decisions that had affected team cohesion and productivity. Her approach was methodical, exposing arrogance and incompetence through logic and evidence rather than emotion. The room listened, captivated. Even those who had once ruled the office with subtle intimidation felt exposed. Sarah's intelligence and strategy were undeniable. She pointed out inefficiencies, offered solutions, and highlighted contributions from those who had quietly worked diligently. The contrast was striking. Those who had disrespected her were now clearly outmatched by her competence and foresight. When it came to the individuals who had humiliated her, Sarah handled them with elegance. She didn't retaliate personally. Instead, she made decisions that reflected fairness and accountability. Lauren was reassigned to a project that matched her skills, but limited her influence. Eric's actions were monitored, and he was given responsibilities that required collaboration rather than dominance. Justice was served without malice, demonstrating Sarah's wisdom. Her team, the employees who had respected her all along, felt empowered. They now saw firsthand what it meant to be led by someone who combined intelligence, composure, and integrity. The office energy changed. Tension dissolved, replaced by focus, collaboration, and a sense of direction. Sarah had shown that leadership isn't about fear. It's about competence, strategy, and respect. By the end of the meeting, the arrogant group had visibly shifted their stance. They understood they were no longer the ones in control. Sarah's quiet strength, her careful planning, and her ability to confront challenges elegantly had established her dominance. The power dynamic was clear, yet no one felt humiliated unnecessarily. It was a masterclass in authority and tact. Walking out of the room, Sarah knew the office had changed forever. The mockery and disrespect that had once defined the environment were gone. In their place was respect, efficiency, and a newfound awareness of her abilities. Sarah had not just reclaimed her place, she had reshaped the entire workplace. Everyone now understood who really held the power, and no one would dare forget it. Sarah started the week reviewing reports, but her focus wasn't just on numbers. She paid attention to people who had always worked diligently, who had shown integrity, and who had tried to undermine her. First, she rewarded those who had remained loyal and respectful. Promotions, new responsibilities, and recognition were given, and the genuine surprise and gratitude in their eyes was the silent reward she had been waiting to see. She didn't need applause or overt thanks. What mattered was that her team felt their efforts were valued. The next day, she held a special meeting to acknowledge these unsung heroes. "You never needed the spotlight, but now it's time everyone sees what you're capable of," she said, with a calm, authoritative smile. Slowly, the tense, competitive atmosphere began to shift. For the arrogant colleagues, Sarah didn't act out of revenge, but she set clear boundaries. Lauren and Eric received firm warnings showing that humiliation and manipulation would no longer be tolerated. "You still have a chance to rebuild lost respect, but under the right rules," she explained. The message was clear. Justice is about balance, not retaliation. And gradually they understood. The interns, once shy and fearful, now felt included. Sarah took the time to guide them, provide feedback, and explain processes. Each action showed what leadership meant: intelligence combined with empathy. Collaboration grew, ideas flowed, and a sense of trust replaced the previous tension. The office was finally functioning as a team rather than a battlefield. During meetings, Sarah encouraged team members to speak up and take credit for their contributions. "This is excellent work, and I want everyone to know it came from you," she emphasized. The effect was immediate. Respect didn't come from fear anymore. It came from trust and recognition. The office's energy shifted visibly, becoming more productive and engaged. Even casual interactions changed. Coffee breaks, once filled with gossip, became opportunities for meaningful conversations. Sarah listened, offered advice, and guided discussions without judgment. Even Mr. Dalton, who had been rigid, engaged more openly. The transformation wasn't just organizational, it was emotional. People learned to collaborate, laugh together, and support one another. Sarah also reinforced the importance of ethics and respect. In strategic meetings, she reminded everyone, leadership isn't about who yells the loudest, it's about who makes the biggest difference. Her message sank in. Inspiration replaced intimidation, and the office became a place where competence and integrity were recognized. By the end of the week, Sarah looked out her office window and realized the change went beyond her. The company reflected her values: respect, courage, and intelligence. She could finally smile, knowing she had transformed not just the workplace, but also the lives of everyone who had trusted her. The lesson was clear: true leadership uplifts, empowers, and inspires. The office, once tense and full of hidden rivalries, now felt lighter. People walked the halls with genuine smiles, greeting each other without judgment or fear. Sarah, sitting at her director's desk, watched it all with quiet pride and serenity. Every glance of gratitude or respect she received was more powerful than any applause. She knew the truth. Real authority doesn't need to be shouted. Looking out at the Chicago skyline, Sarah reflected on everything she had endured. The humiliation, the unfair treatment, the sneers, All of it had shaped her into the woman she had become. There was no resentment, only understanding. Every challenge, every tear, every moment of silence and patience had built her strength and wisdom, and no one could take that away from her. The most remarkable realization was that she hadn't needed to fight with anger or humiliate anyone. Real power came from intelligence, patience, and quiet confidence. Those who had once mocked her now respected her and even learned from her example. Sarah had shown that leadership isn't about intimidation. It's about inspiring others, proving that the impact of a truly capable person is felt without a loud voice. Even those who had tried to undermine her were forced to recognize the value of humility and respect. Others, who had always treated her fairly, finally received the acknowledgement they deserved. The office had transformed from the inside out, and everyone could feel it. The lesson was clear: skill and character always find their place, even when overlooked or underestimated. Sarah stood and walked to the center of the office. Everyone turned to her, and she gave a slight, confident smile. "Remember," she said calmly, "respect is earned through actions, not through loud words. True power is quiet but inevitable." Simple words, yet filled with undeniable authority. She left no doubt. Greatness doesn't need to boast. She realized her journey hadn't been just about proving herself to others. It was about proving to herself that she could overcome adversity without losing her essence, that she could turn pain into strength and injustice into insight. And by doing so, she had changed not only her own life, but the lives of everyone around her. Victory was personal, yet collective, silent, and lasting. At the end of the day, Sarah closed her office door and took a deep breath. Chicago sparkled under the evening light, reflecting the change she had made. She smiled, knowing her path would continue, now paved with respect, courage, and wisdom. Nothing and no one could alter the course of someone who had learned to master her own destiny. And so Sarah's story ended, or rather continued, with a clear, inspiring message. Those who possess intelligence, patience, and dignity never need to prove themselves by shouting. True power reveals itself, and the respect earned this way lasts forever. A finale that leaves the audience with a sense of justice, hope, and admiration, knowing that silent greatness is the strongest of all.